Hello and welcome to this episode of The Rest is Entertainment with me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osman. How are you, Marina?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm not bad. Have you had a nice week?
I have had a super week, thank you, because each day brings me closer to the day that the election is over. And it's really not so long now.
What are we talking about this week? We are talking about, well, do you know what? The Euros and the election have led to an absolute boom in an industry that was booming anyway. It's an industry you may know something about, and that is podcasting. So we're going to talk a little bit about podcasting and what's happening with it and how it is affecting television.
We are also going to talk about something which we meant to talk about last week, but we didn't get quite around to it. Some films. The Trump movie, which is a prequel story about Trump's life, not being able to get a distributor, or maybe being about to get one.
Donald Trump, not Judd Trump.
Yeah, yes. We should always be very clear on this. It is not a snooker movie. It is not a snooker movie. And we're also talking about a movie entirely written by Chat GPT that was going to have its premiere quite recently and has been pulled and is now struggling to find a new distributor. So we'll talk about that.
And I'm also going to talk about why we film Christmas Day editions of television programmes in the middle of June.
Christmas in June.
Christmas in June. In fact, we filmed Christmas on the longest day of the year, June the 21st, I think it was. So we'll talk about that. But should we start with podcasts? Now, there's been this extraordinary storm of the Euros and the election at the same time. And people may know, they may not know. Always right at the very top of the podcast charts are the politics shows and the football shows. So there's some in the goal hanger stable, the rest is football, there's the rest is politics, there's the news agents, there's the Guardian Weekly football show, there's the Stick to Football, the Neville and so on. And the numbers in the last couple of weeks have gone absolutely insane in a way that shows that this is an industry that has genuinely reached a very interesting maturity.
Yeah.
In that it is now absolutely in every part of our life, and it's where we turn to first when something big happens. And firstly, I think that's quite interesting. So we'll talk about why people are turning to podcasts. But secondly, it's really bleeding through into television and how television cover football and how they cover politics. We know our very good friend / boss, Gary Lineker, was getting in trouble for calling the England team the S word on his podcast. And that's the interesting bleed through there, because the BBC presenting team is Lineker, Shearer and Micah Richards. And they also have their own thing, which is completely separate to the BBC, which is The Rest is Football. But the two are, of course, going to bleed across. And if you're Harry Kane...
We should say the ITV presenting team is in large part made up from Stick to Football, with Gary Neville, with...
Roy Keane.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting that those people who have such successful podcasts have sort of almost taken over the broadcast studios. They haven't taken over because they were in there before, but it's now because they have these two things that are very different mediums, really.
Yes.
But there is bleed through.
Funnily enough, the way football has been covered in this country was the kind of precursor to podcasts anyway, because you've always had pundits. They've always been able to speak their mind. They've always sort of chatted. There's always been a bit of banter. It's very, very like a podcast. That idea of three people after a match talking about a game, or three people at halftime talking about a game, is very, very like a podcast. It's always been enormously popular. You always get people who I think are sociopaths who say, honestly, for the football, I don't want any commentary. I don't need anyone talking about it afterwards. I just want to watch the match. You think, oh, really? Yeah. I mean, that to me is a huge red flag. I love if Fulham are ever on telly, England on telly, I'm there an hour beforehand because I want to hear every single thing that is said. But it's absolutely the precursor to what podcasts are, which is people who are interested in the world, people who know things about a world, people who've been involved in a world, chatting to each other and having a sort of a relationship that over the weeks viewers get to know and get to understand and get to know the quirks and peculiarities. So, of course, football is going to bleed out into a podcast immediately. But if you're on Sky or ITV or BBC, there are certain responsibilities that you have because people are switching on. You're inside people's homes. It's
very different to a podcast. You have not specifically chosen them and want to engage with them. It is where the England game is being shown, to pick an example. And those are those kind of big national moments. There's a sense of occasion. Well, I mean, when I first started covering football, the print writers would wear a jacket and tie when covering England games, which I found hilarious. There was a sort of sense of occasion thing. And there is that sort of, when people lots of people haven't asked those people necessarily into their home. It's not like picking on a podcast thinking, I love these guys, I'm going to listen to them every week. They are there because they have the broadcast rights, and you have to address all the different groups.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I'm always saying this with comedians as well. Is that if people buy a ticket to your show, say what you want.
Yeah.
Say absolutely what you want. If they're offended, they can walk out, whatever. But they know what they're getting, so they paid their money. Whereas if you're on a Channel 4 show or a BBC 2 show, you are in somebody's living room. So there's certain jokes that actually, just don't do. Just don't do it. And podcast is exactly the same. Gary, Alan and Micah can say exactly what they want on their podcast because people have chosen to download it. They've chosen to listen to it. They're listening to it because they love it. They listened last week. They listened the week before. Same with Stick to Football. People are getting what they want. And on the actual show, you see on the actual show, they are a little bit gentler. You can actually see they push a tiny bit more. Gary's a bit more opinionated than normal because he's normally an anchor, and they're pushing him into having an opinion. And you can see him occasionally catching himself going, no, you know what? I'm Des Lynam here. I'm going to step back.
You have to remind
this.
yourself. And if we talk a little bit about people who present the news, who also have taught. There was a sort of big podcast show in London, a sort of trade event in London, maybe last month, and they had a lot of BBC presenters, news presenters, who also do podcasts for the BBC as well. Like, I don't know, Amal Rajan, Nick Robinson, Justin Webb, Mariana Spring. And they were talking about it, and every single one of them, and Justin Webb was sort of particularly articulate about this, saying it's very difficult because we didn't used to broadcast like this, and now we do podcasting, but I also present the Today programme, and suddenly you're in the middle of the Today programme and you think, hang on, this is live and I'm doing it like a podcast. It's very difficult when you do two things that are, they may seem to lots of people like, oh, it's just audio, isn't it? It's just a different form of radio. Yeah. It's not. It's very different doing the Today programme for the BBC in the morning and then doing something, I don't know, Americast or something like that, where you're just, and it is much more conversational. But he says, and they all said actually, we've got to, it's great that what podcasting has done for broadcasting, in the worst thing about our industry is that when people talk in a way they think they're supposed to be because they are broadcasting.
Yes.
They sort of imitate broadcasters, whereas the best broadcasters who've broken all the way through are not really like that, and they're their authentic selves, and that's why people sort of are drawn to them and they sort of believe them and they trust them at moments of national crisis or joy or whatever it is.
For example, that's why we always loved watching Paxman, but then everyone who tried to be Paxman, that's harder to watch. That's people copying.
That was a tough watch,
you know, the thing about Paxman is not be like Paxman, it's be like yourself, because he was not being like Paxman, he was Paxman.
Yes. And I think also you have got a whole generation of people coming up who have just watched YouTube and TikTok and things like that, and find the formality of broadcast so bizarre, and that people are talking, you know, in a sort of, why are you talking like that way? Nobody talks like that. And podcasting is much closer to the way that people talk, and it's much more a voice in tune with those currents that draw people to YouTube and TikTok and things like that. So it feels...
Yeah. So the Justin Webb thing, and as you say, talking about the Today programme, and this is the thing I think sometimes people don't understand, especially when you see on social media, when they talk about the BBC and they talk about news organisations, and they say, why are they not taking this person to task? Why are they not saying that? Why not they not saying this? I said on Twitter. And you think, if you had the first clue of the strictures that are placed on every single news broadcaster in this country, the things they are not allowed to do, not allowed to say, the biases they are accused of from all sides, so that the lines they have to follow, and by the way, it's a nightmare if they don't follow them. That is why the news media is like the news media is. That's why they're not asking the question that you would like them to ask, which is based on hearsay that someone else said on social media. They can't do that. They can't do that because you haven't cleared it. Right? You haven't worked out if it's definitely true. You haven't followed it through. You haven't seen 4 different people saying, yes, no, that definitely happened. So they cannot do any of those things. If you listen to the news agents, now that's Emily Maitlis and John Sopel.
And Lewis Goodall.
The joy with which they are now able to give their opinions, and which they are now able to step over lines, which when they're at the BBC, they weren't not stepping over lines because the BBC is right-wing or fascist or the BBC is left-wing or whatever. They weren't stepping over lines because it's a nightmare if you do. Yeah. Every single time you do it, there are inquiries. Every time you complain to the BBC, you have to follow it through.
And it's right that it's a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely.
Impartiality is so important, and people have all sorts of views about BBC impartiality and the mistakes that have been made in recent years, and maybe some of those are on the money and maybe some of them aren't.
Yeah.
But have a far, far less polarised, as we've previously discussed, news media in this country, not whatever you read in the Mail or the Times or wherever, which tries to make it sound for commercial reasons that it's far more polarised than anywhere else. If you look at the North American news market, it's a nightmare. It's completely polarised. They have these very small reach things that are very polarised. People either think they're completely sort of far left, like the New York Times, or far right, like Fox News. There's nothing like the BBC, where about 60% of people just use it all the time and find it and don't have a problem with it. There's nothing like that at all.
The secret about football and about news podcasts in that way is, by and large, and there's a caveat to this, but by and large, those podcasts are the thing that happen once the microphones are turned off in the studio.
Yeah.
So in the studio, you'll talk about England and how they played, and you have to be cautious and you have to be respectful, because you do know that it has a big impact on the team. Okay, so you understand that culturally, what you're saying, if you're ITV or BBC, is important. Okay, and people will be hearing it and listening to it. When the microphone is switched off, you can say what you really feel, and that is what happens with podcasts. And the same with news ones, is that once you've interviewed the minister and you throw to the weather, the thing that you are then saying to each other, by and large, is what happens in podcasts. Now, there's a further limit to that, of course, which is there are things that offer, because like with us, this is just how we talk anyway, apart from when we libel people endlessly, which, of course, as soon as a microphone goes off in any studio, everyone gets libeled, because if you give your opinion on someone, without it being on air, you can pretty much say what you want. But that idea that the people who you are listening to have a slightly different view of the one they are allowed to say, that is what should happen.
Yeah.
We shouldn't hear their untrammeled opinion, because it's a national broadcaster, whether it's ITV or Channel 4 or BBC. We should not be hearing just their unfiltered opinions, even if you agree with them, because there's loads of people who don't agree with them, and you wouldn't want to hear the unfiltered opinions of someone you disagreed with. So it's good that they're not allowed to. But I think the really interesting thing is political podcasts. And I think if you look at the rest of this politics, you look at the news agents, they are genuine phenomena.
Yeah.
Okay? They are huge. And they're huge in a very peculiar way, because we've been told for many, many years that people are not interested in politics. They certainly don't want to hear dry, dusty old talking heads talking about politics. And you know what? People do want to hear that. People want to hear people who know what they're talking about politics, talking about issues. What they don't want to hear is what we're currently served up on traditional news media, which is people from the different parties being asked questions, forced to defend themselves, not giving answers.
Punditry in its purest sense, perhaps.
It's actual candidates, actual people running for election, arguing with each other in a way that is not illuminating to anyone. It'd be exactly like if you're watching Match of the Day, and someone's talking about Manchester United and saying, the thing about Manchester United is we have the best defence in Europe. And you go, well, look, you don't, because I can, if you look at the numbers, no, look over, no, please, don't, listen, I didn't interrupt you, Gary Neville, so please don't interrupt me. If you look over 5 years, actually, and if you look at inflation, actually, we have the best defence in Europe. No one wants to watch that, right? But that's all politics.
And I think that part of the story which led to lots of the political shocks that we've seen over the last, 10 years or so, came via the news became like a reality TV show. And as we've talked about before, people booked people who had very polarised opinions because it made for fireworks.
And that is not what people want.
And as it's turned out, people don't want to hear people argue. And it doesn't have to be the parties, because they had any number of proxies, whether they were from, a tax think tank or this, that you knew whose side they were basically on.
100%.
And nobody really, people wanted to hear more stuff from the middle, or at least just not it be done in such a confrontational way, as though it was an argument about, who ate more rice in the Big Brother house.
Yes.
And now there isn't enough for anyone else. And it became something like that, just a permanent argument. And actually, for a while, it was quite engrossing. And when you think of all the Brexit wars, and particularly what happened after Brexit, when for years Theresa May was trying to get a deal, people would watch politics. People would watch the Parliament channel. They never had ratings like it. People were interested in it. But as you say, the way in which it was being talked about was sort of very much by the party's proxies.
Yeah.
And people became very tired of it.
See, people want disagreement rather than argument, I think. People want, again, like you have ex-pros talking about football. And you have ex-pros talking about football for a reason, which is they can be honest and they can be sanguine and they can understand the limitations of the team that they played for and the strengths of the team the other team played for. That's why you have ex-pros talking about it rather than you have current players. If you had an actual Man United player, an actual Liverpool player on Match of the Day, what can they do? They have to say, no, I love the gaffer. No, the gaffer's doing a great job. But you can't do anything else. We all know if you work for a company and you talk in public about that company, you have to be respectful because you've got to go back there the next morning. And that goes for whether it's us or whether it's current footballers or whether it's politicians. But that is not of interest to people. And the interesting thing about podcasts is the market is telling the political media now what it is that people actually like and what it is that people want and how they want to encounter their politics and how they want to hear about it. They don't want to Labour Party bigwigs talking about it. They don't want two Tory Party bigwigs talking about it. They want people from both sides who can be respectful, can absolutely disagree, but can try and give some illumination, which is what has been missing. And the political media, the bookings drive me insane. Because I just want to say constantly, who do you think is enjoying that booking?
Oh, I know. The interview could have been done in an email. Like most things can be done in an email. And there has been so many interviews where you just think, I've just got to wait until you've hit the line for the 5th time because you have to do it 5 times or you'll be beaten by your special advisors when you get home. And
TV political media has been enthralled for so long to social media and saying, oh, no, but this got shared. This is trending. You think, yeah, of course it's trending because 8 people talked about it. But no one's actually caring. No one's actually look at your viewing figures. Are they going up? Are they like massively increasing? Because I tell you now for a fact, if you do a TV show people love, your viewing figures go up. They go up and up and up and up and up, and then you've got a hit. And if that's not happening to you, then these amazing stunt bookings that you're doing are not working for anything other than very, very, very short-term social media gain. And it denudes our politics, right? It makes us think that everyone's shouting at each other all the time. It makes us think that certain voices, which are the loudest, are the most interesting. None of those things are true. And somewhere in this new world of podcasts and somewhere in the genuinely brilliant brains in political television, there is a new way of doing this.
I agree. Can I add a bit of a caveat on sort of tone? Because tone is one of the most fascinating things for me. It's really interesting to me how if you strike the right tone, you can have absolutely nothing very much to say, but people love it. And then if you get the tone wrong, you can have all sorts of interesting to say. And sometimes something comes along with a tone that really speaks to the times. And there's something about that type of podcasting that does. And I was trying to think of something analogous that isn't podcasting. And I thought, when all those blogs came out, the Nick Denton started the Gawker blogs, and he had so many different ones in the stable. They had ones that covered Silicon Valley, one that covered showbiz, all those things. But that particular tone was so definitive in the sort of noughties. And all sorts of traditional media, print media, started copying it, even though these were very young people writing funny blogs, and they were posting. It was, it was snark, I suppose, and they were posting 10 or 12 times a day.
But clever snark.
And people were, and it somehow was a tone that spoke to the times. There is clearly something about this type of tone. What I worry a little bit about is it becoming the omnitone, where absolutely everything. Yeah. I slightly was watching Roy Keane after the England performance on Sunday night and thinking, I would have listened to you on the Biden debate. I would have, I would have heard you on that, And there's a temptation that it's all that kind of viral punditry moments. Everything is. I'll tell you what's quite interesting in this. That show, the one who's got the CBS show that's got the Champions League rights in the US. Yeah, and they've got Jamie Carragher, Michael Richards does it. And now that's often gone. That goes viral all the time because they try and go viral. They have all these bets. If you lose a bet, you've got to wear an Arsenal shirt. So they have all of this stuff, and it goes viral all the time. And it's becoming very popular it's really done a lot for Champions League coverage in the US. But there's something about it where I saw sort of Jude Bellingham, maybe this was at the end of last year, having a go at Michael Richards for some of his or while he was on the pitch for some of the predictions. And I thought, this is so weird. It's like the fourth wall is being broken. It's all just becoming a sort of, and I do worry slightly about the omnitone where everything, and actually eventually the Today programme sounds like a podcast and everything just all sounds the same. I quite like there to be diversity in the type of broadcasting we have, or podcasting, all of those things.
I think that's exactly right. I think there's I don't want the Today Show to be like a podcast for sure. I don't want the Daily Politics to be like a podcast. But what I want the producers of that to do is feel feel emboldened by what they're seeing people enjoy, and to go, maybe I don't have to do these stunt bookings. Maybe there are smarter bookings. Maybe there are some older people. Maybe there are some professors, for goodness sake. Maybe I can find a character who people love to listen to. They can agree or disagree, but they love to listen to that person. Maybe that's where bookings can come from now, because bookings for the last 5 years on political shows have come from one place only, and that's sensationalism. And all I'm hoping is that the enormous success of these political podcasts might let just one producer in one office say to their exec producer or their head of news, maybe I'd ask this person rather than this person.
Have you seen Uncle talk about VAR?
Yeah.
If you'd ever said to me, be quiet, she's going to talk about VAR now. No, this is not possible. It's amazing. Go left field, because you might just find an absolute cult goddess.
100%. And it's often the people who go, but that person's not going to pop. That person's not going to trend. You think, well, maybe that's what we're after.
Yeah,
someone who's not going to trend.
Yeah.
Someone who just knows what they're talking about. Yeah, Christine Uncle is the absolute breakout star.
It is difficult, though, when your day job and your podcast job are perhaps map almost entirely onto each other. I can see why Harry Kane might think, I can still hear what you're saying, and yet you can see why that can feel...
It's a fascinating transitional moment where both of those things, for ITV and the BBC, their podcasts absolutely bleed into the TV coverage, and no one's quite sure where they are. And I think it's tough for the presenters. I think it's tough for the producers. I think it's probably easy for the podcasters, because the numbers are going up and up and up. But it's a really, really interesting moment, and it's fascinating to see what the fallout is. I think for football, the fallout will be less so, because I think the two things map much more interestingly and easily. I think for politics, I think that this huge podcast revolution will be interesting to see the election coverage this time, because you've got the Rest is Politics guys on Channel 4. You've got Ed Balls and George Osborne on ITV. It's going to start bleeding in more and more and more. Because if you're not the BBC, you might as well do it like a podcast, to be honest.
But I mean, the BBC have had some extraordinary election night coverage. I return you to the idea of Andrew Neil on a ship that was moored on the Thames, which was full of celebrities. This was 2010. I could not believe what I was seeing. I remember seeing, there was Joan Collins, Bill Wyman of the radio. Bill Wyman was asked, after quite a lot of glasses of wine, I imagine, at 4 a.m. about how he thought the night was going. Bruce Forsyth was asked about the exit poll, and he said, I think it was a good poll. It was high. It was a good poll. I mean, he had absolutely no...
poll? I think it was.
I think it was a good poll. Yeah, he had absolutely no idea. And it was just full of celebrities. And Andrew Neil glowering at a sort of buffet table in the middle of it all, having to have these people brought along with a glass of champagne to talk about politics. This was what... Please, I don't know if there's any of it on YouTube. They may have tried to scrub the entire internet. I would like to know the full passenger manifest of that ship. But it was one of the funniest things. I mean, all election coverage really should be such a complete car crash, because you do need something to keep you going between about 10 and 2.
And that was the last crazy thing to happen in UK politics.
Yeah. We pretty much sorted everything out.
Calm sailing ever since then, hasn't it? But a really, really interesting time. And as I say, these podcasts are genuinely doing great business, and that intimacy and what have you. And you hope that television learns the correct lessons from it. And listen, we can cover the economics of podcasts at some other point. But on that note, should we go to an advert?
Let's go right now to an advert. This episode is brought to you by Sky. Sky is home to some of the very best shows, including, and we're very excited about this, the brand new season of House of the Dragon.
That's right. Season 2, House of the Dragon, is streaming right now on Sky. You're an enormous fan, aren't you?
I am an enormous fan. And if you're not already an enormous fan, you can catch up with the first season. But the new one has just dropped, and the hype is justified. The first episode is brilliant. Can't wait to see more of what's going to happen. Now everyone's at war. And more shocking twists and turns.
There's a lot of dragon action in this.
There's a huge amount of dragons. There's going to be 5 new dragons.
And the clue's in the name, right?
Yeah. House of many dragons, but actual real name of the show, House of the Dragon.
Best dragon?
Best dragon. There's a massive one that hasn't been claimed yet called Vermithor. That's huge.
Vermithor.
That's a very powerful dragon. There's a little one called Moondancer.
House of the Dragon is available now exclusively on Sky.
Go to sky.com to find out more.
Welcome back. What next, Marina?
I think we're going to talk about films. We were meant to get some of these last week, but we didn't. I would like to talk first about the Trump movie. This is called The Apprentice, and it's the story. It's a sort of origin story of Trump, really, back when he was a kind of baby real estate mogul with this kind of dreadful mob lawyer, a guy called Roy Cohn, who this movie would certainly suggest taught him everything he knew. And it's got Sebastian Stan, the Winter Soldier, Pam and Tommy. He is the young Donald Trump, and Kendall Roy, Jeremy Strong, is Roy Cohn.
Okay.
Now, the performances are supposed to... It had its premiere at Cannes. And obviously, because it's an election year and therefore it would have a lot of attention. By the way, everything gets an 8-minute standing ovation at Cannes. If you open a packet of crisps, someone will give you 8 minutes of applause. Okay, so having said that...
I would do.
Yeah.
After sitting through a 3-hour movie.
Having said that, it did very well. And it was generally critically liked. But it cannot find a distributor. Now, it honestly, normally you exhibit an independent film at a film festival like that, and you would hope to get someone who will distribute it, who will put it in cinemas for you. And none of the big studios or the streamers, despite the fact this movie had a lot of buzz, I wonder why I wanted to go near it. Now, as soon as the film was shown at Cannes, Trump himself sent cease and desist letters. They said, we're going to come after you if you try. So basically all these people are scared. And they last week, it seemed as though a deal was on the point of being done with a distributor called Briarcliff. Now, this is a guy who had the guy is run by a guy called Tom Wartenberg, and he's distributed other problematical, complicated, or controversial things. Fahrenheit 9/11, the Michael Moore documentary about sort of George Bush and 9/11. Spotlight, which was about the Catholic Church abuse.
The Washington Post story,
the Boston Herald.
The Boston Herald story. Yeah.
And what were the other ones? Dogma, which is that Kevin Smith sort of religious satire, and that the is it called W, the Oliver Stone George W. Bush sort of
so he doesn't
satire.
mind a bit of controversy.
He doesn't mind a
quite
bit
the
of it.
opposite.
But the fact is that this movie has got 1, maybe 2 award nomination worthy performances in it. You'd think people would want to be. They've got another issue, which is that one of the people who backed the film, by the way, this film has got 45 producers, which tells you a lot of something about independent film, which is that those people, by the way, have not sat there and thought, right, have we got the catering trucks? Have we got this? They have put money into it, and they've had to, as always, you've got to patchwork together all these sources of funding in order to get this film made.
That's why, like at the beginning of a film, when you sit through all the things saying a Canal Plus production in association with,
the Norwegian Film Association.
Also thanks to, and the more of them there are, the longer the gestation period of that movie
just
was.
the agony of trying to get that thing to the screen. Anyhow, this has clearly been the case to some extent here, but there's a Trump backer who his company at an arm's length sort of backed this or gave some of the money, quite a significant part of the money, and I think was told by the director, who's a guy called Ali Abbasi, who said, yeah, no, it's going to be pretty middle, it's going to be a bit of a punk rock kind of historical movie, but it's going to be kind of down the middle. Anyway, this guy saw a sort of truncated 20 or 30 minute cut of it and absolutely lost his mind. There is a scene in it in which Trump rapes Ivana, his first wife. Now, she did originally say, Ivana did, you may remember, say that he did rape her. And then she went back and said, yeah, no, well, he didn't literally do it, but I felt violated as a woman. It's very unclear what actually happened, but they're insisting that the scene stays in. And the Trump backers firm, which is called Kinematics, is saying it must come out. So they're at this sort of stalemate. So they're thinking, people are trying to basically buy this firm out. You see how hard this is to get this thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, but they want to get it out in an election year. Now, you're probably thinking, well, why are the studios so completely wet? But Hollywood is terrified of Trump, and they're probably even more terrified after Biden's disastrous debate performance last week. And so this deal is not yet done. Whether it will be done, Trump does not want this movie released. He says it's election interference by elite Hollywood powers or something absolutely mad.
Okay.
Anyhow, but the studios, are they right to feel afraid of Trump? And I have to say that someone who's been touted as being the next attorney general says, we will come after you criminally and civilly. Anyway, but if you look at what actually happens, you think, oh, well, this would be great. Even if it's on Fox News all day and they're screaming about this movie, it's all publicity. But actually, what happens with these things is that they can make a lot of trouble for you, the MAGA crowd. If you see what happened with Ron DeSantis down in Florida, that don't say gay law that you weren't allowed to promote gender teaching or homosexuality teaching in school, Disney sort of belatedly opposed it. By the way, they did the worst possible thing. It had already passed, but they sort of belatedly opposed it. And DeSantis said, I'm going to go after your they had a special law. Did you know this? Walt Disney World in Florida had a law that allowed them to be the government of all the land around their park. It was called the Reedy Creek Improvement District. Well, let me tell you, he said, I'm going to repeal it, and it no longer exists. They don't have the right any longer. So what he does is he comes after that your core business, and the parks are a very big part of Disney's business. They're the most runaway success part of Disney's business. If you look at what happened with Budweiser when they used a transgender influencer, it really affected their stock price because they had this huge kind of backlash. So these corporations are very afraid, and they are not allowing. And this is why they didn't want anyone to go anywhere near this movie.
So if you're one of the big studios or a big financier, essentially when the movie's been made, it's ready to be distributed, the costs associated with opening a movie like that across America and across the world, it can be $20-30 million, something like that. Maybe a little bit more if it's opening in more cinemas. So they are going to people saying, would you give us $20-30 million to fund this movie? And they're going to say that to every single studio. So every single studio is sitting there going, well, I've seen the movie. Is it going to make us money anyway? Is it going to make my life demonstrably difficult for the next year? Yes, it is. Maybe will someone else have the bravery to open this movie? Maybe they will.
Probably they won't.
Yeah, but
they won't, because I know where I work. I work in Hollywood, and they will not be brave. They say they're brave. They take risk all the time. They don't take they take very few risks.
If you were sitting on a $30 million fund, would you recommend financing the rest of this movie?
Yes, well, it's made and it's ready to go, and yes, I would. We will, by the way, we'll be able to see it in Europe because it's got European distributors. It's got distributors in some of Asia. It's got lots of places.
Oh, that's all I care about.
Yeah, that's all we care about. That's where we're going to watch it. But they might, but thanks to this guy, if the deal gets done, they might have it out. They want to get it out in sort of September or October, so not in the actual early October, not the kind of frantic last-minute pre-election run. So it'd be interesting to see, but it's kind of extraordinary that a movie that's clearly good, with great actors in it, giving brilliant performances, and is very, on the money and is interesting and is about now, cannot find a distributor because Hollywood is afraid of Trump.
Yes, and that's often how censorship works. And the way we talk about soft power, like the BBC sort of displaying soft power across the world, and the World Service being an amazing thing for the UK, the soft power of the right often shows itself here, which is coming after people in the law courts. If there was a feeling that Biden was going to win the election, or whoever replaces Biden was going to win the election, you might find some bravery in Hollywood, because actually you'd be sitting on a huge film.
Oh yeah, like Disney, they'd become very brave after the event.
But given that I think the feeling afoot is that Trump is probably going to walk it now, I suspect they won't see it anytime soon.
Well, I'm not sure it's entirely, I'm not sure it's entirely clear he's going to walk it. But even so, it's going to be difficult. I think that maybe Briarcliff will still be able to distribute it, but it would be much smaller than it would be if one of the bigger people had done it. But Trump has said, I will come after all of these people. And so you think you're going to have the Department of Justice, the Commerce Department, all up in your business, and you will do. I mean, what's in it for him not to do it?
Yeah, it's like, listen, we understand, with podcasts, the BBC don't want the Daily Mail coming after them. But if you're a big studio, you really don't want the president.
The Department of Justice just goes through absolutely everything. No, it's going to be very difficult. But this is why they're kowtowing and they are afraid.
But in other interesting distributor news, and as I say, if you're going to distribute a movie, essentially it means a lot of the costs are already paid for, but you add in an extra chunk, you market the movie, you're the person putting in the last kind of $20-30 million. In other interesting distribution news, the movie we talked about recently, the Coppola Megalopolis movie, has got a distributor.
It has, but I think Coppola said something like, I'm confident they will apply the same tender love and care given to Apocalypse Now, because Lionsgate are going to distribute it. We distributed Apocalypse now in its 45th standing year of revenue and appreciation. It's like, I'm not quite sure that this one's going to go that same distance. However, and they've got to find quite odd things. They've got to find the live action actor who at one point comes onto the sort of stage in front of the screen and addresses the Adam Driver character for every screening.
So in the screening, there's literally an actor in the movie theatre, or the cinema, we might call it.
Yeah.
Who
addresses the Adam Driver character through the screen.
Okay.
Maybe they will drop that element of the film. I don't know.
Oh, I would find that awkward.
I tell you what's even. Let us talk now about this AI movie, the movie that has been written by Chat GPT. It was given it's called The Last Screenwriter, and it was given a 17-word prompt, Chat GPT, and it wrote the script in 4 days. And it's a story about a screenwriter called Jack, who is celebrated, but maybe he's got writer's block or something, and he encounters a sort of state-of-the-art AI system that surpasses him, and he uses it, and he becomes extraordinarily successful, but quite understandably, he also has some sort of existential crisis. Now, this has been performed by real actors, lit by real humans, all of that, but the script is by ChatGPT. And the director, who is a guy called Luisi, one word, Luisi, said that he really wanted people to see it, and because he wanted to start a debate. I believe him, by the way. I don't think they're trying to... And yet the Prince Charles Cinema in London was going to have the premiere on a sort of Sunday night a couple of weeks ago, and pulled it after complaints from patrons and so on, saying... oh, we've had to listen to you because we know that people are very worried about this. Now, I think this is, and they have pulled it, and there is no clear idea of when this will get a screening. I would like to see it.
I'd love to see it.
I think it's important to see it. I mean, the thing about the AI thing, and particularly in something like screenwriting, is that the Industrial Revolution or whatever took decades and decades to happen. This is going to be incredibly quick. And people keep saying, we should talk about it. But you're talking about it like you've got time.
Yeah.
I think it's really good to show people a movie, say, by the way, this is written by, and then you're forced to confront it. You may say, well, it's hopeless and it's not very good. And it's like, don't worry, in 3 months it will be a lot better.
Well, that's what this guy Luisi's done. He's not just some hack who's going, I can't be bothered to make a film, I'll get AI to make it for me. So that's not what this story is.
It's not a stunt.
Yes, it's a guy just going, you know what? This is what happens if you do that. So the prompt that he gave was, write a plot to a feature-length film where a screenwriter realizes he is less good than artificial intelligence in writing. That was the thing he gave. And then 4 days later, he gave him lots of other prompts as well as it came through. And then literally just filmed exactly what came out of Chat GPT. And the reviews, people who've seen it, saying, look, you can sort of, kind of bits of it hold together, but it's a nonsense and it keeps repeating itself and it's a mess and there's no structure. And I think that's the point that...
I've seen quite a lot of action movies like that, let's be honest.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the point that Luisi's making, is come along and watch this, because this is where artificial intelligence is now.
Talk now about it.
Talk now about it, because we can see that it's not right. We can see that it doesn't work, but we can see that there's human beings also behind various bits of it. But I think he's trying to do something interesting rather than...
So do I. Yeah. And I think we should see it. And I think it's a big mistake to have pulled it, because that's another form of censorship. And that obviously many real humans were involved in the making of this movie. But I really think people should talk about this stuff right now. There is such a lot of weird displacement activity. All studios should work together instead, and just in the same way that news publishers should be working together. I mean, the New York Times is suing OpenAI about saying that, you've crawled all over our content and you've done this, and we can tell from our own AIs that your AIs are doing this. And that's how you have to set an AI to catch an AI. It's absolutely mad. But
there's a film.
Yeah, well, exactly. That could be a sort of 5-word prompt. But everyone should be banding together, talking about it right now. It is going to happen very quickly. You do not have decades to consider it and think, well, we've always embraced innovation in Hollywood.
Well, that's the thing. So the movie is interesting because it is clearly AI currently is incapable of structuring a 90-minute, 2-hour movie.
Well, I would argue that Guy Ritchie is as well. So, but
like Guy Ritchie's real. So it's incapable of doing that at the moment. As you say, it won't be for long. But it's already taken over large parts underneath that industry. The world of editing, the world of SFX, all this. There's lots of AI stuff. Toys R Us just released their first ever completely AI advert.
Did they?
And again, they did it in a blaze of publicity. It's not one of those ones where they go, let's just save a bit of money and do this by AI. They absolutely trumpet it and say this whole advert is done by AI. And you watch it, it's sort of, it is what it is. It's quite creepy. And obviously, there have been a lot of human beings involved with it afterwards because AI cannot control everything. But it's got AI music, it's got AI voiceover. It's got the whole thing is AI. And the chief marketing officer of Toys R Us, and this is the point that you're making, which is it's already with us. She said, well, why are you doing it? She said, well, the train left the station and we just decided to be the first ones on it.
Yeah, but if you don't think it'll come for chief marketing officers' jobs as well, this is the thing that all the studio executives, I think in many cases, are thinking, well, maybe we will use this a bit. It's like, oh, you don't think it's coming for your job as well?
Yeah.
I mean, really, wake up, okay? Wake up. They should all be working together on this to try and I, like many people, believe that they should be suing OpenAI for using their stuff, because it is absolutely clear that those large language models are being trained on the content made by these people. Historically, now they're using news articles, they're using everything. And you can tell, and other AIs, as I say, can tell that this is what's happening. And everyone should be working together to sue over it.
That's exactly right. As a writer of books, which I own the copyright over, and I very much look forward to the next few years of I very happily stand in a court of law.
Yeah.
And so, because it's copyright infringement. If anyone else did it,
leading a class action without any question, but you should do.
Well, for example, if I literally put a lyric in a book, just a lyric, just one line from a song, I have to get permission. I have to pay money. So by and large, people just don't do it.
Yeah.
But if you do it and someone says, I'm very happy to do it, you have to quote it, you have to give permission. That person then gets some money or waives their fee. So, copyright is a real thing. The thing that people have written and created is enshrined in law. And these machines have been absolutely just dredging,
all day long,
dredging the North Sea for cod.
About whether they're involved in. I mean, it'd be interesting to see whether people are thinking we just all have to work together, instead of thinking, well, we'll sue them. Or everyone should work together. It should be constant class actions by all the various industries that are having all of their stuff scraped.
I will speak to Penguin Random House this week about their attitude towards it.
It'd be interesting to see,
very
because
interesting.
And banding together, I think, is the crucial thing, because the New York Times is sort of going it alone, but I think all sorts of newspaper publishers, news media publishers should join together, and I clearly think the studios should as well. Everyone should be thinking about this, because it's coming for everybody's jobs, not just the writers or whatever.
Well, do you know what? The writers actually are the only ones that can survive. The writers and the actors and the directors, who obviously have the biggest voices at the moment, they're the ones that will survive. And you're absolutely right. And the people who won't survive, it's the marketing officers and the distributors and people, like the stuff that actually could be done by a machine.
Well, like I said to you before, that business of cutting the trailers. Yeah. People prefer AI to cut trailers now. So if you don't think that trailers will all be cut by AI in about 15 minutes, again, it's the speed of it, which means that action should be taken now.
But I will say this, everyone listening to this, there are two things they want to do right now. One, they want to watch that Trump movie. And two, they want to watch The Last Screenwriter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I want to watch.
So someone put The Last Screenwriter out so we can have a look and talk about it.
And then at least we sort of know where we stand, and we can start from there. Shall we finish off with a lovely gentle topic, which is last week on House of Games we recorded our Christmas Day special, and a lot of people were asking, why on earth are you recording Christmas in June? And it leads into quite a lot of other interesting things about the scheduling of television shows. People, after the one thing you always get, if you've got any sort of thing, movies, books, TV appearances, the question is always, oh, when's this out? Or when can we see this? And the answer is always rather complicated, and it's interesting why it's complicated. The Christmas one is easier. So, literally the longest day of the year, June the 21st, we did our Christmas week of House of Games. And people are saying, well, that can't be very Christmassy. And actually, it's really rather delightfly Christmassy. You go in, everyone's in Christmas jumpers. That's the tradition. That's everyone is.
It's just the law.
Yeah, it's just the law. All the music being played into the studio is Christmas songs. Genuinely, at lunchtime, it was roast turkey.
No.
And roast turkey, because the caterers do the same thing. Everyone is like, oh, it's Christmas.
It's a mood.
Yeah, it really is a mood. And actually, it's amazing how just a bit of Shakin' Stevens can make you feel. It really is. You record all of this stuff. We had a slight problem, because right at the end of the week, we had this big snowfall. Right, so you have artificial snow. It's in enormous barrels, and it's locked up in the lighting rig in a studio that's very, very high. And at the top, there's a big grid where all the lights can kind of move, go along. And essentially, to some of the lights, they'd attach these big barrels of snow. And we're literally, it's nine in the morning. We're about to go on set, and somebody quite junior, but now being looked after by everybody, knocked the button with their elbow, and the entire snowfall was unleashed on the studio at 9 in the morning. This what's supposed to be this great end to the Christmas
That's fantastic.
week, the whole place. And I walk onto set, and every single member of crew has a broom or a leaf blower, and all they're doing is clearing up bits of snow. And for the rest of that week of filming, some days were not Christmas at all. You were finding bits of snow absolutely every. Oh, can you imagine that? How gutted. Honestly, those mistakes happen, and so
I couldn't really imagine myself doing that. So yes, and my deepest sympathies. I hope this person is now in TV witness protection.
Yeah, exactly. No, they were. Listen, it was Christmas, so they were forgiven immediately. But the reason you film Christmas at different times of the year is because television recording schedules, and television transmission schedules are completely different to each other. So listen, we've got live TV shows, and the show goes out when it goes out. But for something like House of Games, we record 100 episodes a year, so each year has 20 weeks of original shows, and I think we have 20 weeks of repeats of like 2 series back as well. So you're on for 40 weeks a year. The rest of the year is Wimbledon and so on. So you're recording those 20 weeks. Now you record those when everyone is available, and you record them all in one go, because it's not just me and the 4 other people on set and the camera operators and what have you. There's a whole team of people putting that show together, writing all the questions, editing afterwards, all that stuff. And if you start doing it piecemeal, like let's do a day here, let's do a day there, you've got to employ people, then stop employing people, then employ them again. So actually what you do everything in a chunk, because not only is it economically the smartest way of doing it, just for people's contracts and their lives and their schedules, it's just you get every one that you want. You say, look, these are the 4 months that we're doing House of Games. You book them all in and you do it. And last week was the last bit of filming of House of Games for this year. So we're not going back into studio this year. At any point, we've knocked off all of our shows for the next year. So that's when you have to do.
Well, I hope none of your contestants is involved in a huge scandal in e.g. November, and then you'll start with someone on the Christmas special who's done something absolutely unspeakable.
Don't. That's absolutely. Of course, it's the nightmare. Like, any time you ever do anything in advance, it's the complete nightmare, because almost all shows are done in advance. I've been in TV long enough to remember we would always go, don't have questions about the Queen Mother. Right, that's how long I've been around, because you just think it's.
I remember in COVID, actually, this has just come out of my. This morning, I don't know why they did this. Just say it's a pre-record. Yeah. They had a Christmas Day episode, and it was Phil and Holly at the time, and they're all dressed up, and and it was just say we've pre-recorded this. No one thinks you've come in on Christmas Day, but then there were people walking past all the windows on the way to work, and also by that time. We were in something called the tier system. You so much of COVID, I'm like, no, I can't remember that ever happened to somebody. Yeah, no, there was a tier system, and then London was moved into tier 1, and that meant that you couldn't go to work or something like that. And it's like, so there were all these sort of tells, but I mean, the main tell is no, of course they haven't. This is people used to think that Jules Holland on his New Year's show that everyone, all the celebrities just gave up their New Year's Eve to come and hang out with him, but no. But I have to say there is a rich tradition of because Merry Christmas, Merry Xmas, everybody, the Slade song. Yes. That was recorded in New York in 1973 in the middle of a heat wave, absolutely high summer. And they weren't known at all in New York, and they were recording in this studio that was, it was apparently the acoustic was a bit odd, or they didn't like the acoustic. So they wanted to go out into the corridors of this thing, which was mainly an office block. They had the sort of top floor, but they went out. So there were the business people walking past. Was he screaming, "It's Christmas!" Thinking, what on earth? But anyway, and it's obviously been an absolute banker for them ever since. So
it's exactly that. And it's the other interesting thing. Okay, so obviously you record things in advance. Now with House of Games, we can play them out of order. We can't play a week out of order. Tuesday has to follow Monday, Wednesday has to follow Tuesday. But in terms of the episodes, we can record them out of order. We can play them out of order. If you're doing something like Countdown, or Pointless would be another one, Deal or No Deal would be another one, where it's returning contestants and there's a narrative, everything has to be done in the order that you do in it.
Yes.
Now, Countdown is always very good in that Countdown knows it's on all year round. And so if you watch Countdown, they will say, oh, it's the 3rd of August. It's, National Raven Week. Then they talk about ravens, right? So they can absolutely root it in when the time and the place is. With this, funny enough, with this House of Games Christmas week, because Christmas is on a Wednesday, the BBC are still not sure what days it's going to go out. So I'm presenting it. Firstly, I can't say it's Monday's House of Games, which I like to say, because it could go across a week. We don't absolutely know. But secondly, I don't know what day is Christmas Day. And I don't know if it's pre-Christmas or post-Christmas, anything like that. So that I hate, because the one thing I love about presenting TV shows is thinking about what the viewers are doing when I'm presenting.
Yeah.
Like, where are they? They're with their family? Are they sitting by themselves? And it's like they've been working and this, they've made their tea and this is the end of the day. I like to think of exactly how people are experiencing it. And on this, you couldn't quite, because it might be pre-Christmas and it might be post. So there was a lot of kind of dancing around that. But I was talking to Glenn Hugel, who used to produce Deal or No Deal. And Deal or No Deal was like Countdown, in that they knew what day of the week they were going to be on. And, they knew when Christmas was. By the way, Deal or No Deal, we once recorded next Christmas's Christmas show last December. We were like a year ahead. And funny enough, John Richardson is on the Christmas House of Games, and he said they once did Cats Does Countdown Christmas in February, and he said that's the worst time to do it, because you think we literally just got over Christmas. So, June is absolutely fine. February is terrible. So Deal or No Deal, you'd know where you were going. And Deal or No Deal, I think we used to do 46 weeks worth of a year. So there'd always be 6 weeks off in the middle where they'd play various things, repeats or of something else or whatever. And Jay Hunt, who was the head of Channel 4 back then, who was brilliant in every way, during one of these the first week of this 6-week hiatus, Deal or No Deal was so huge then. Jay came in and looked at the figures for the previous week in terms of the overall share and go, why are we down a whole point in overall share? And someone goes, well, that's literally just because Deal or No Deal is off. And she goes, well, then put it back on. And they're like, okay, well, we'll put it back on.
Oh, no, you're out of sync.
So they ring Glenn and they say, yeah, okay, Jay wants Deal or No Deal to come back on for 6 weeks. And Glenn's like, okay. He said, but I'm very happy to do that. But just so long as she knows that does mean like our Christmas episodes will be going out in the middle of December, because they're absolutely they're date stamped, and that's why they then started doing Celebrity Deal or No Deal, so they could have 6 weeks starting. They could stick in the middle,
yeah,
exactly, because Jay said I'm not going to have another day when Deal or No Deal is not on this channel, and so they had to have this emergency stopgap. But with all those things, people say, when is that show on? It is difficult to say. A show like Pointless Celebrities, when people come on, we record all of them as quickly as we can, or in as kind of confined a time space as we can, and then they are then played out over the next 2 or 3 years. So I'll have people who've been on say, "Oh, my episode hasn't been on." You think, well, they're rationing them out.
It's coming down the slope way, just slowly.
When you write a book. So I looked back over my notes this morning just before I came in. The first draft, which is not a million miles from the last draft of Thursday Murder Club, was delivered in March 2019. I think the final draft was April 2019, and it didn't come out till September 2020. So books have a lead time of like over a year because of marketing, and they want to get it out to people, and they, all that kind of stuff. My books now have a lead time of about 2 months because I'm like, look, so that's easier. But books have an incredibly long lead time. Movies have an incredibly long lead time. So the Thursday Murder Club movie, which they started filming last week, people go, oh, when can we see it? You think, well, that's going to be at the very best autumn 2025, because films take such a long time to film, and then take a long time to edit, and then they take a long time to market. And TV shows, unless it's Christmas, you really never know what they're going to come on. Which brings us back to why people love podcasts so much, which is, when's the podcast out? You go, well,
let's do the show right here.
It's out. It's out right now. But if your favourite celebrity ever says they're on the show, and you ask them when's it coming out, just so you know, they don't know. Right, they will not be told. No one will know unless it's tied to a particular date, which with Countdown you can do, or if you're doing a Christmas show you can do. Then nobody knows the answer to when is it out.
Very good.
But also Merry Christmas, everybody.
And Merry Christmas one and all. And on that note,
no, and we had a dog in the studio.
Oh, lovely.
Oh my God, which is always the best thing you could ever have on a TV show. We had the cutest dog, but of course it took the longest to record of absolutely anything. We needed it in the pack shop for the prizes, because one of the prizes was a dog jumper, and literally about half an hour of getting this dog to do exactly the right thing. But it was an absolute cutie called Sadie.
Oh.
Is that us done?
I think it is.
Thursday though,
please
come back
join
for a
us
question
for the
and
questions
answers
edition on Thursday, where we'll be answering you. And do remember that the email address for questions is therestisentertainment@gmail.com, and keep sending them, and your top threes and all the things that you would like us to discuss, and we will attempt to get to them. There are so many good ones.
Lovely. See you on Thursday.
See you Thursday.